entrepreneurial cities. Themes this year is revenue generation, scalability. It's not enough, we fly, but we need to be able to make a profitable business out of it. And we do believe not only regulation should allow that, but this innovation should be a scalable and profitable model. So today, our last panels actually will talk about the money, the finances, the businesses, and what can we do today to make revenue, and how can we scale up for those. So with that in mind, the first panel is investor views on scaling businesses. I would like to introduce the panel moderator first, Dario Di Martino, who is the founder and CEO at DMD Solution. And you would ask me why Dario is moderating this panel. I tell you why. Because he did exit from his startup already. And he actually one of the founders who successfully exited. So Dario, thank you for accepting the invitation. And on the other hand, I have Gabriela Matic, who is a venture partner at Aerospace Xelerated, which is actually a Boeing company. We have Gary Katz, who is the challenge director at Future Flight Challenge Program, who will explain us how government invests actually to these new innovations. And of course, Gabriela will explain how a private company like Boeing invests. And we have Gordon Breaker, who is the policy lead of robotics at DSIT UK, and he will also explain us the private public part, and we have Etienne Louvet, who is the founder and CEO of IONA, and also an angel investor, if I know well, and if I can recall it. Great, so the floor is yours, Dario.
Thank you, Esther. So when Esther asked me to moderate this panel, actually for the second year in a row, because last year I was also moderating it, a similar one, I was thinking, okay, what the people, what the founder and investors and company wants to know, no? So last year, with some people that are also here, like Eric Brock and Graham Lynch, we had an interesting discussion about investors' view on scaling business. And the idea was that in 2020 and 2021, with good ideas and a nice proof of concept, was kind of easy to raise funding, to raise money. Still in 2022, but in 2023, investors were looking for something different. So we're looking for a company which were generating already revenue. So not maybe profit, but at least revenue, so money from operation. No? So today, my goal is to understand what is the outlook for 2025. So, and I think now we have today we have a good panel because we have a good mix between private and public investors, or persons which are involved in this world, and also entrepreneur, people that are kind of user of this money. And regarding to myself, like Esther said, I've created my company 10 years ago, DMD Solutions. It's an engineering company who's based in Barcelona and Lucerne in Switzerland. And we provide engineering services in the field of safety and reliability for certification. So we work a lot in conjunction with Lorenzo Murzilli. And I had the I don't know, lucky, or I don't know, I was lucky enough to create my company, see my company growth, and at a certain point find a good business partner who take over. And I'm still CEO of the company, but now I have some big brother who's helping me in growing even more and scale my business. Okay, so I think that's all about me, and I would like to introduce and leave the word to my fellow panelists. Etienne?
Good. So can we hear me well? Yeah. So I'm the founder and CEO of IONA. I've started the company and incorporated it in the UK actually almost 3.5 years ago. My background is more business, but more specifically consulting and strategy and deep tech. And it's probably what led to the creation of IONA. I was seeing a lot of companies with autonomous systems especially, and I was passionate about logistics and passionate about autonomous mobility, because I think it's going to disrupt completely the way we think about the businesses, the way we think about the economy, and in general, like the world in the future. The problem is most of the companies that I was advising, it was a bit frustrating sometimes because there were either very good engineers with not a very good understanding of the product, and so it was a bit of wishful thinking sometimes, or very good business people with absolutely zero understanding of the tech, which ended up in a very bad situation too. And so I partnered with a few people from my past, basically, and especially people I was working with on aerospace, including Dr. Saif Dinakani. And we started to work on what could be the best cargo UAV for last mile logistics, but in rural and remote areas, especially using the BVLOS framework. That it was 2021, so we were starting to understand what had to be built and how to be compliant by design, basically. I have another hat. I really like startups, and I'm a geek, basically, for quite some time now. And so I also invest as part of angel syndicates and with friends for the past 5 years about. Small tickets as part of syndicates most of the time in deep tech startups, mobility startups. What I don't do is SaaS and fintech because they don't need me also. And because I really think that there is a shift in the economy and that software is becoming a commodity. So we need to find new ways to create value, and we need to find new ways to create defensibility in businesses.
Thanks, Etienne. Gordon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gordon Baker from the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. My main investment, if you like, is an emotional investment in the world of drones. I've been in a government policy role. Initially ran a workshop on drones back in about 2016 and 2015, where we discovered, or were looking at those opportunities and challenges facing drones. And ever since then, I've had different roles, but always had a kind of an eye on and an enthusiasm for the opportunities of drones. I'm now the innovation in our department, and my minister, Patrick Vallance, is particularly enthused and encouraging us to drive innovation and the benefits of innovation across government, and to unleash that benefit in society. So I've got a few comments I'll make in the panel along the way around the landscape we have in the UK to support drones and those opportunities, both as a sort of procurement opportunity for government to take and explore and exploit the benefits of drones, but also working with the FT and the CA, ensuring we do that safely and effectively is critical. The only last thing to say is I've done a little bit of, we're working a lot with Gary and done a little bit of a look around, where the UK, what companies are achieving in the UK. And my analysts in my department have, with a company called Data City, done a lot of work around just identifying so my role is broader in robotics, what we mean by these different companies. And drones, I guess, are a bit easier to identify, but robotics companies are hard to see. And you're investing in some of them as a geek, in some of those deep tech opportunities. But we've got company lists now, and we've identified 430, companies that we call drone commercial operators. I know Simon at Moonrock says he's got 2,500 policy owners for drones here. But what is the size of that opportunity? Who are the operators at the moment? How many drones are they flying? What's the reality of that? And then where is that business opportunity going and growing? Is something I find very interesting, and we're trying to, as a department, support and exploit.
Thanks, Gordon. Gabriela?
Yes, hi. So I am the venture partner for Aerospace Xelerated, which is Boeing's startup accelerator program. We've been running since 2019 and have so far invested in 42 companies with, I think, as of today, a survival rate of roughly 93% or something like that. Lots of different areas of aerospace and adjacent industries, from Industry 4 to sustainability to autonomy and AI. And I have sort of changed roles in my time at Aerospace Xelerated quite a few times, being program director in the beginning, building up the program from scratch, to now as venture partner, really working closely with our founders and helping them scale and raise more funding after they had raised from us. So Aerospace Xelerated historically, and we are in a time of transformation, so watch this space. We've always invested at least £100,000 structured as a safe note into our portfolio companies, and then supported them to raise more funding from that point. And we've seen a lot of really exciting stuff from autonomous de-icing solutions in Canada to planning solutions for vertiports to operating systems for drones. The last one top of mind for me because just recently, so one of our portfolio companies, CZI, and I feel like maybe one of them was meant to be here today, but I haven't seen them yet, have done a beyond the yes, that one. Flight a couple of weeks ago from the Boeing offices, I think 85 kilometers sort of in the country to inspect the national grid. And it's a really, really important one for us because they're really shaping, policy and regulation as they're building their company. And you can see I'm excited about the startups. I'm a founder myself, so other than a venture partner, I'm also a co-founder of an innovation consultancy called Metta. And we build accelerators and help small and big companies innovate. Also an angel investor in lots of sustainability focused companies. And really excited to be here today.
Excellent, Gabriela. Thank you. Gary.
Super. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Cutts. I lead a thing called the Future Flight Challenge, which is a UK government programme. It takes a long time. I didn't use slides because if I use slides, it becomes a very long speech. But what we are is very broad. We're looking to develop the integrated ecosystem for drones, air mobility vehicles. We're also taking hydrogen, electric, conventional aircraft as well. So it's a pretty broad range. But from our point of view, they all share a commonality that they are digitally enabled, clean, and they're introducing new market segment to aviation. So that's the commonality of all of those things. So we are a £125 million programme. A lot of that money is going to grants into companies. CZI is a really interesting link point. It's one of our poster children. So, what is success for us is Boeing investing in CZI after we've invested initially. So that's what we're here to do. Lots of investment in industry. We've also done a lot of work on integrating and creating the ecosystem, bringing people together. And that includes investors, regulators, and, various pioneers in the industry. The thing I wanted to leave you with is just kind of the three objectives that we had, because the third one of these we may forget to come back to, but there were three objectives we had when we launched the challenge, because frankly, getting £125 million worth of taxpayers' money is a non-trivial activity. You have to know how you're getting that. There's lots of draws for taxpayers' money. So the three things for us were, number one is creating the industry, high value, important jobs spread across the country and positioning UK industry, as of course all other countries want to do. Number two, equally important, we want to do something which is of social value. So the end result of the drone and eVTOL operation is something better for society, better, faster transport and services. So you're leaving a legacy that way. And the third thing, not so many people talk about, it's one of my passions because I come from a large aerospace background. It feels like a lifetime ago, 5 years in this world. But it's that flow of technology possibly into traditional aviation. So these markets have to do things that traditional aviation has not had to do. So if I touch on autonomy, I'm utterly obsessed by this. Drones will have to go to a high degree of autonomy to be economically viable. eVTOLs will want to transition to autonomy because, frankly, the pilot's an expensive part of it. The tech that's generated from that will find its way into single pilot operations and eventually, some point in the distant future, autonomous flight for large commercial transport. So there's three elements of building jobs, doing societal good, and then creating a flow of technology. That's why we invested.
Excellent, Gary. Thanks. So as you can see, a lot of different point of view, valid point of view. And now let's go into the topic, investor view on scaling business. So my first question, and this question is for all of you, I would like to hear your point of view is, again, from what I said at the beginning. So in 2021, 2022, according to me, basic POC and good ideas were enough to raise money. I've seen it. And 2023, okay, investors were looking for a company generating money already, revenue. So what are you guys? First, do you agree with this view? And second, what is the outlook for the 2025? Etienne.
Yeah. So I think the main element is venture capital and in general startup investment is about risk perception and risk analysis. The reason why we ask for money to a startup, it's because it connects basically the dots and it means that there is probably a pathway to profitability or like to success. There are other ways to do it. It's much harder to convince without, definitely. But I think good to remind ourselves that there is a reason why, and it's not like the end goal is not revenue. The end goal is what is your path to profitability. If you're looking at very, very deep tech like space, for instance, you're not going to make revenue and you're going to have like a Series E without any revenue, but you have a massive opportunity. So the risk reward is worth it because maybe there is only a 0.01% chance that this company is going to launch a satellite on their own. But if they're doing it, we're talking about $1 billion opportunity. So the risk reward is worth it. I think the main and probably the first thing that I would start with is the problem I see is a disconnection between the risk reward. If you are targeting a super niche market but asking 200 million just to get a proof of concept, there is a problem. You need either to change the scope of the company or you need to change the milestones and the go-to-market to get there, basically. And then probably if I have to talk about like scaling, without going to the usual stuff around investors in Europe, we don't have that much money, so like we need to be more picky and everything. I think something that is very, very difficult and is probably a question for the others actually is there is no playbook. If you have a SaaS or if you have a fintech or if you have like anything that is well known, basically, you will have a possibility to say, okay, what is your monthly recurring revenue? What are the metrics basically that you need to track? When you assess deep tech, you don't. And so either you use a technological due diligence that might not be a good reflect on the product because you can have the capacity to fly, but it doesn't mean that you're a good product or a good company, actually, if it's flying something that is not valuable or if the market is not good. Or you're using a pure business approach, and in that case, you will have stupid questions because, well, it's agnostic, basically. So you will have questions around like, why don't you have as a service revenue from day zero, even if it's not possible, and things like that, because they don't have the same expectations. So yeah, we need to see success before understanding what is the playbook. And when we will have a playbook, it's probably going to be easier, but at the same time, too late to invest in that sector.
Okay. Gordon, your opinion.
Something I read this morning, which I just copied and pasted. Drones have been overestimated in the short term, but underestimated in the long term. That was Appian's CEO reported this morning on their business proposition. Well, not on their business proposition. This is the point. Like, what do we mean by drones? There's a kind of what has gone on so far, and I think offshore oil and gas and some safety critical, some visual line of sight operations kind of were investable and were routes to market for some of the early drone operations. But I think in the generic, I think we see. And then quoting someone else, PwC talking about 45 billion market opportunity for the UK. That's an awful long way away, and as they would say, moving to the right each year because that requires everything to be fully exploitable and enabled, and that's not yet happening. But on the way, you've got different business models that will come and go and be exploitable. I think there's definitely something around sticking with the dull, dangerous, and dirty. Get the public acceptance into people losing the dangerous things that we currently do that drones should be doing, making jobs safer. The really repeatable, boring, dirty kind of activities. There's definitely carbon savings there. Where is that longer term opportunity? I'm not the entrepreneur that's going to exploit that, but there's with Skydio, zipline raising, what's that, $600, $900 million. There's definitely people who've got views that there's some big markets out there. What's the biggest UK fundraise? Possibly Skyports, but again, that's global markets. It's not just UK exploitation. And the other big one, which we may come back to a bit more, is military. What's your military business proposition and model? Because they're certainly trying to buy them. Our military have been very public. They're trying to spend £200 million on UK manufactured services and drone solutions, this year, and there's wars going on that are using these. So there's a huge opportunity and demand there. I'll pause.
Gabriela, your view?
Yeah, I meant to actually, when you asked the question, give a different answer, but Etienne, you made me think about something. Because you're right, we don't really have as many or very few success stories, right, to learn from and build playbooks from. We do have some failures, right, that are starting to kind of come in, if you want to call them that. And it depends on, I guess, what kind of investor you are. But for me personally, I think that's useful, because doing a little bit of a postmortem on some of the things that have been happening over the years really helps highlight some of the gaps, right? Yes, it's super hard to predict unit economics in this space, but looking at some of those predictions, without naming names, we're just wildly off. So actually, it shows us where we need to look closer when working with early stage companies. And yeah, the only other thing I think, as much as there's less investment and there's more careful and risk-averse investors out there, it seems, there is certain challenges and problems that need solving, like sustainability, like things around dual use, that are really pressing and really urgent. And I think there will still be big opportunities for innovation to come in and raise for solutions that actually address those.
Thanks, Gabriela. Gary?
So I think you were talking about, what did the landscape look like a few years ago? What will it look like next year? I've been doing this role 5.5 years now, so it's actually quite a long time of the life cycle of this industry. I've become kind of experienced in that time. And interestingly, when I came in, and channeling the voice of industry now, not my personal view, it was moderately easy to get investment. Now, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, if there's a lot of money swirling around, it's easy to get investment. Number two, if there's lots of good ideas, it's easy to get investment. And I would suggest that 4 or 5 years ago, both of those were true. There was a lot of cheap money flowing around the world, and drones were relatively in their infancy in a really big, exciting, tech-driven industry. So lots of investment went in, which, if that sounds cynical, it's not meant to. That's just how these things work. I then think over the last year or so, the general feedback we get from particularly the SMEs and startups we work with become much harder, become much tougher. So capital is harder, money is not so cheap as it was. There's lots of other places it could go, lots of alternatives. And I'm going to mix eVTOL and drone. This is probably mainly a drone crowd, but to me, they're the same. They're the same conceptually and technologically. But both those markets, drones and eVTOL, have run into the sort of it's getting hard part. So for the drone part, it's the regulatory bit of how do you get to scale, how do you do big beyond visual line of sight at enough scale to make the economics work. So a lot of people are now walking into that saying the trials are great, but this is really hard. It's a safety critical industry. What's the regulatory framework? eVTOL's slightly different. eVTOL's is a lot more about the aircraft. And again, look at the eVTOL, and a lot of people is intended to have certified and be operating by now. In general, these things are just going back. It's because the good idea is now meeting the reality of certifying a safety critical vehicle. Now, I want to, before I just end up there, that shouldn't leave us with a negative feeling. It shouldn't. That's just reality. What I think will happen in 25, 26 is two contrasting things. And I'm going to make a plea for optimism on this. I think we'll see people disappearing. We'll see businesses failing. We'll see business models failing. We'll see reality kicking in. And I think we should look at that as, well, that's capitalism. That's our experimentation, trying to do things. Some work, some don't. But it all moves things forward. I think in the same time period, we will absolutely see, and probably some of the people in this room, they will go to that real revenue and profit generative point. I think you'll see both happening in parallel. And one of our challenges when we talk to investors is not to let people get spooked by the first few big casualties that go under, of people then extrapolating that to the industry doesn't work. No, that's just one business model, didn't work at one point in time. So that's going to be really exciting the next 2 years.
Probably, I probably can do back. Actually, I fully agree on like the scale. I didn't reply on the scalability of the business. I think that also like from an entrepreneur side and for any investor, the scalability is about like when do you exit, when do you actually get the return. And the problem is we are a lot in Europe in general focusing on the next step. And just like, yeah, let's go to the next step. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a success. If you can't compete later on, if you don't have the scalability, if you don't have anything that is supportive in terms of ecosystem, we can talk to the CAA. And you need basically an environment that is also lowering the risk level. Because when you assess an investment, it's not about just the environment, just the company, it's about also the environment in which it is. And also competition. If you have two companies doing exactly the same thing, and let's assume that it's a good thing, and they're doing it well, the problem is an investor will always and should always invest in the company that is in the best environment, connected to the best people, capable of raising subsequent rounds of funding, and so on and so forth. If you have a quarter or like a tenth of the funding that another company doing exactly what you do has, you are in deep trouble too. And that's, I think, probably the elephant in the room. That's why I recently moved my company's headquarters to the US, because we have to, basically. And that's probably where there is something to work on. This is probably where we need to really target specifically support, because I also believe that in a smaller market, people that are capable of going from 0 to 1 will always be capable of going from 0 to 1. If a company dies at a really, really early stage, it means that they were not ready for what's coming next anyway. So if the beginning is easy, the end is going to be very tough, and the opposite around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, connecting to what you guys said, and this was my last question, but I like to put it, to ask it now, regarding risk management and adaptation strategy. You know, in this market which is evolving really, really fast. No, we have seen what happened some time ago with Lilium. No, sometimes unpredictable. No, which are the strategies you guys, the investors, are using to manage the risk?
I don't think Lilium is due to the market, but that's another problem. So in terms of risk assessment and risk mitigation especially, there is something from Jeff Bezos that I like, which is the one-way door and the two-way door, basically. If I'm making a decision, is it something that I can't go back on? Basically, it's definitely set and it's set for life. Or is it something that I can reverse if needed in the future? When we worked at IONA, we worked on a very specific tilt rotor design, which is not the easiest thing to do, with a quad architecture, and all the rotors are tilting, so it's not the usual hybrid. That's quite complex, and it raises a lot of questions in terms of regulatory and BV laws and everything. Some people in the room worked on it, actually. And we had to understand very well, like, what is the logic behind the framework? When we understand very, very deeply what is the logic behind the framework, we can make decisions, and we can make decisions that are based on like a very, very precise column of this is set for life and we can't change that, and this is something we can change. And then the complexity of probably starting a business in drones is to understand what is connected to your business case and what isn't, basically. So you have to align the business case with the regulatory framework, with the technological capacity. Mm-hmm. And that's dealing with a lot of complexity. The only way to do that is to have a very clear framework in your mind of what are the solutions what are the decisions that I need to focus on.
Okay. Gabriela, your point of view?
Well, for us, because we are an investor, but we're also an accelerator. And I think one of the, if we were to call them risk mitigation strategies, that we focus a lot of time, not just on supporting the founders and our portfolio, but also helping us and them build partnerships and build an ecosystem around them that, helps mitigate some of that risk. And I think there's something around making sure that when it comes to regulation and certification, we have companies that really understand the road ahead and are aware of where they need to go and who they need to ask for help to get there. There's also, insuring ourselves or getting insurance somehow by really, really asking for robust safety data in some of those safety critical environments and real evidence of the reliability of the technology that in the early days is harder to achieve, but that kind of, for us at least, helps us mitigate the risk a little bit.
Okay, Dario, could I maybe add,
sure.
if we just have time to? So if I give you a couple of perspectives, one is a perspective I hear and then a personal perspective. We had an event in Canary Wharf a little while ago with a number of investors in this space. We were just trying to have a conversation with investors, and in the margins of that, talking to these, typically large institutional investors, their perspective a lot is who are the people who are doing the underpinning technology piece, the sort of digital software piece, because, and I'm not saying that's the only place to invest, but the way they look at it is that's more likely to be transportable, it's less capital intensive, and if you're developing that tech here and it doesn't work in the UK, that just goes to another country really quickly. So there is the more generic the technology, the less chance there is you're investing in something which is kind of redundant. A personal view, and I've, as we talk to industry, I've got a number of charts we use all the time saying, what do I think it needs to be successful? And I just keep building on these over the last 5 years. But the thing I've started saying most often now is this adaptability piece, because really obvious to me, may not be true, is the technology is novel here. The markets are also novel. The markets are not stable. And I'm absolutely certain we don't understand which will be the most important markets. In 5 years' time, it'll be really interesting. We'll be surprised by where the money is made. So if you're in a world where the regulations are developing, the public attitudes are developing, the technology is novel, and you don't really know where the market is, what should you be? Be really adaptable. So for me personally, I would look to that in industry. You've got yourself a business model and an idea. What are the different ways you can pivot that and do different things with it?
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, can I dive in?
Sure.
Thanks as well. So there's, I feel like if we say risk, we've got to mention the CAA and the Innovation Hub and the efforts they've made to try to go, look, we understand there's risks about trying these new, airframes and business models and in different places with different technologies and deconfliction, all that. And the efforts with the Innovation Hub and the sandboxes and everything are trying to de-risk. They're trying to support some of that proof of concept. Of course, moving from sandbox to full operational ability is really hard, and there's still work to go. But there's no template or investment model for that either. So that's that's a collective challenge to some extent, and also non-trivial. And extending beyond that, my own sort of personal reflection or bugbear is actually that expression or understanding of risk is only one of the bigger issue, which is if we're trying to enable these safety, the use by network rail to stop people from walking on tracks and getting run over by trains. There's lots of risk reducing operationability of drones that we hope will make these use cases investable. That you've got those business models that just don't fit with the CAA's risk aversion of flight that we can't quite reconcile. So risk is looked at in different ways by different elements of government and companies, and I think it's a non-universal but collectively owned challenge. This how we get over that. Why is it still right to have a guy dangling from a harness off a wind turbine to try to inspect that? It's because he can't get the approval to do it in the other way. Why not? But then et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of squaring some of those circles is still to happen. But I think that's where we're going to unlock some of the big value and the investment opportunity as well.
Maybe just on that, I think the main pain point for the entire ecosystem at the moment is that the market is globalized. So you don't need access to a specific funding stream or like something that is better than anyone else. You just want access to something that is at least as good as anyone else. When you have 26, 27 countries around using the same framework, you probably want to use the same. Because the problem is, otherwise, I'm not going to drive resources to like a very specific framework that is just going to be used in the north of Scotland. I love the Scottish; they were super supportive, but it's a bit niche, maybe. And it's even more frustrating when you realize that if you have a TRA, which is something that doesn't exist in the UK at the moment, if you have a TRA like here, the worst that can happen is that you're going to kill 3 frogs, and yet we can't have it. So what some countries are doing really well is a back and forth, understanding the business certainty that is needed. And it doesn't mean that we are prone to an accident. Actually, the worst that could happen for the industry is to have a catastrophic accident that could like completely backlash on the entire industry. But what we could do is assess the risk in a more modular way and on a more case-by-case basis, so that we at least make sure that we're not missing out on the next big thing.
Good. Before going to the question and answer, I have literally one question, which for me is very important. So you have like 30 seconds each to answer. So which are the indicators, according to you, that suggest scalability and which you are looking for in a company? Etienne?
In a drone business, I suppose, or at least aerospace. I think the team. Actually, the only thing that can prevent a team or like a company from failing is not the very specific milestone that they had or the funding stream that they just received, is the capacity of the team to adapt, because it's going to change and it's going to be painful.
So the human capital.
Yeah.
You say. Okay. Gordon.
I think let 1,000 flowers bloom, or whatever it is. I think it's just an awful lot of individual niche business models that if people want to try to get them to market, go for it. My own current reflection is right now, military is probably even though it's impossible historically procurement-wise, our government's trying really, really hard to make it easier, and they've got a massive, massive budget, and they know it's not going away, and they really want to buy capability. And there's loads and loads of different elements in it, hardware and software, encryption and comms and capability, flight management. There's a huge amount going on there. So if you haven't already kind of tried to work out if you fit with that, then I think there's a big opportunity there. The £4.5 billion defence drone strategy published in February this year will give you some indications. I can point you towards individuals if that helps.
Thanks, Gordon. Gabriela, your thought?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious ones around kind of a clear path to some sort of first survivability, but then revenue, solving a real problem for some end customer or kind of the world. But I do have to agree with actually the team. I think the team, as much as your technology might be cutting edge, you need to have the right people on board to actually execute on that and make it through a really, really long and hard road. But yeah, if you do it right, it pays off.
So human capital as well.
Yeah, that would be the number one as well for me.
Good. Gary?
I've covered this a little bit, but for me, a 3-part answer. And the first 2 bits are kind of the way that we assess people we put grants into. It's not written this way, but this is really what we do. Number 1, is there something really smart here? Is there a basic innovation that's technically worth going after? Number 2, can you see a way that you can get that to market? Because you see lots of people who've got one or the other. They're really, really smart business guys, but there's just nothing there. There's no source of success. You see disappointing lots of people who could be brilliant and have no idea how to take that to market. So back to your points earlier, I think it's a combination of the team, innovative enough and know how to do things. But I'm going to use my earlier answer. I accidentally answered this question, one question early. That adaptability piece, that's really important, because the way this market will evolve, I'm going to repeat myself, in 5 years' time, we'll look at this going, wow, who would have thought that's where the money was? So you want to invest in people who can chase that as things evolve.
So an adaptive business plan you would like to see, no? Something like that.
Is it? Well, probably this could become a much long-winded answer, but I think that's more about the ethos of the company, the degree to which the people are adaptable, not hidebound by I've laid out a plan, I have to follow the plan. It's the willingness to be adaptable and take feedback and amend things. So I think it's more of a mindset thing.
Yeah. And keeping yourself open to opportunities and challenges that you might not have thought of before.
Maybe just on that, I do have a red flag though, when I see companies going for a go-to-market that includes going for the military in the first place and then scaling to civilian applications, because I think it's just usually not possible, actually. Also, like the scale of a company needs to be international. As soon as you're going to CFIUS agreement, NSCIA and everything, you're doomed, basically. You're not going to move, and your market is going to be a niche, whether you like it or not. And on top of that, if you, I don't know, maybe they're here actually, if you speak with DESA or if you speak with the DOD and the MOD in general, they have very, very specific needs that are not necessarily the needs that you will have anywhere else, actually. So if you speak with DESA at the moment, they want heavy lifters. I am quite skeptical about the business of heavy lifters in the short term. I think they're just bad helicopters. But this is what they want to do, ship to ship. Personally, I don't have a ship, so I don't need that. And I think that it's a quite niche market.
Okay, yeah. Kind of agree with your view, yeah.
Also don't have a ship.
Good. So let's go to the question. I'll democratically go for the most voted. So many business models require electronic ubiquity mandates, UTM or other infrastructure to scale. How confident are investors that this will come in time? Gordon or Gary, I don't know.
Gary?
It absolutely will, but I'm just I've worked with too many smart people in this industry, so the industry and the breadth of ideas, and for me, the fact it's a startup industry, it's full of lots of individual ideas, it will solve those problems. It's not high risk.
It's coming.
Okay.
Man says it will have to.
And there's business models that some people are, on the way, but yeah, it's coming.
Hopefully the startups will be still alive.
Still alive,
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go with the second question. What government and regulators should do to avoid stifle innovation and avoiding having company like Lona move elsewhere? IONA, sorry.
Yeah. So I guess it's for me.
Well,
it's difficult. It's usually like very difficult for a government or even a big company to understand like a market that is just starting. And so in general, I think it's more like an attitude. You see that in some countries, an attitude of like open chats and discussions on like, we agree on the fact that it should be something for the future, that it's gonna be important, and so let's work on like working backwards, basically. What is needed to get there? What are the things that I care about in terms of government? Like, what do I need to see in order to be satisfied with, okay, you can move forward? And what are the requirements for the business side? I think there is not like a single, single element that could solve everything. Suddenly.
Also because I believe it's an environment which change really fast. So an environment which maybe is not good today to change government or like some boundaries condition change and can be optimal, no?
I can tell you, for instance, that the rationale behind one of the co-lead investors in the last round, who's a US investor, was if you're in the US, the US framework is not better. I had a chat with Bobby actually about that. It's probably even a bit worse. But in the US, we think that you can have enough money to bridge the gap should you need it, basically. Because we have less money, we need more flexibility. We need to work closely with the regulators. We need to work closely with the environments and everything. So we really need to adapt, basically, and that's difficult. So flexibility probably.
Yeah, maybe just one addition to that. I think because of those tight cash flows, one thing government more generally or regulators, it's just continuing to be and maybe increase transparency around what's to come and what founders or businesses need to prepare for. Because, yeah, having conversations and collaborating and shaping, you know, what the future of this industry looks like is one thing, but making sure that we don't lose all the innovation or founders on the way there is another.
Good. I don't know if we have time for another question. No? Okay, so it was great for me. And also I hope for the audience. I learned different point of view, which are very important for, let's say, keep on growing on this market and I mean, build our way to success. So thank you guys.
Sure.
And
Thank
thanks
you.
to the audience.